people would just literally run through the exact same case time after time after time and do it from scratch. And instead of doing a case and helping an individual person, let's just like pool our resources and let's automate something so that instead of helping one person, we can help 1,000 people.
Today on LawNext, we talk with Kimball Parker, a lawyer and entrepreneur who was recently recruited by the Silicon Valley law firm Wilson Sonsini to start a technology subsidiary for the firm, and whose many other notable accomplishments include co-founding and directing the LawNext lab at BYU Law School, which I've written about a number of times at my blog. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. Before I get to my interview with Kimball, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. Kimball Parker, welcome to LawNext.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And I should say, for the benefit of our listeners, that I am here live in your office in Lehi, Utah. Very thrilled to be here.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks for making the trek out to Utah to come visit us.
Yeah, well, making a day trip through the area today with a couple of different meetings, and I'm really glad to be here. So you were recently selected or appointed by Wilson Sonsini to start this technology subsidiary for their firm called SixFifty. And you were, just before we started recording, showing me some of the stuff that you're working on, and we'll talk more about that. But before we get to that, I wanted to kind of go back a little bit, backtrack through your career. You were a practicing attorney. You had a startup co-counsel pretty early in your career, and you've done some other stuff. But whenever we just start with co-counsel and have you tell me what that was and what motivated you to begin that company.
Yeah, so I started my career after law school. I worked at Quinn Emanuel in their Silicon Valley office, and I had a really good friend, one of my best friends there, who had just started a business that went through Y Combinator, and it was a video splicing tool. Anyway, and he invited me to dinner. I went over to dinner kind of on a Sunday, and he told me, like, in a nervous wreck, that he had been sued by his former company for breach of fiduciary duty based on his new startup. And so it was a really interesting experience because I had literally just tried a fiduciary duty case. And, fiduciary duty law, especially kind of corporate opportunity fiduciary duty law, it's not that complicated. There's only 4 factors there. And so, but he was a wreck, and this is one of the smartest people that I've ever met in my life. And he had actually gone to the Stanford library to try to figure out what he was being sued for, and he could not figure it out. And I think that I thought about that experience for a long time and kind of thought, geez, that is just not, how could that be the case?
Yeah.
That like the smartest person I know, he has a PhD, from some of the best, he got educated at the best schools in the nation. He's developed this kind of interesting, groundbreaking video technology. He can't figure out one of the most basic 4-part doctrines in the law. And so I think that actually really kind of started me thinking about how the law is structured and how inaccessible it is to everybody. And so I actually then talked with Lincoln, who's our engineer, who's
sitting within earshot of us right now.
Yeah, that's right. And he, we're really good friends. We're actually cousins. But kind of telling him about that and this experience, and we came up with this idea to build a crowdsourcing platform that could kind of crowdsource that kind of knowledge that my friend, really didn't have access to. So that's why we started co-counsel, and we actually did it over a weekend up at a cabin.
Yeah.
Lincoln is very proficient. I've learned, since learned very, very proficient engineer. And so we just kind of brainstormed. We invited a friend who worked at Google, who was kind of into cloud services and big data. And so then the 3 of us just sat up in this cabin all weekend, created this co-counsel tool that actually ended up being used a lot for kind of what it was. But that was.
So the idea was who was going to be crowdsourcing what?
Yeah. So well, we didn't exactly know. Because
Because crowdsourcing has had mixed results, and I've written
so
sometimes about so many legal sites that tried to run based on crowdsourcing but couldn't get the crowds to come. Basically, was the problem.
Yeah, actually, so it was very interesting. I was just telling my team the other day that I talked to like 22 law firms to see if any of any of those law firms would be interested in kind of contributing content to co-counsel. And so our pitch was like, gosh, you're going to get a real big reputational hit, and this is going to be great for you. And it was impossible. We did not really get. We had one lawyer who was into medical malpractice, who got into it, but otherwise, it really was almost impossible we thought, to kind of incentivize lawyers to crowdsource.
So many lawyers have this aversion to sharing their work product for fear that they're just sort of giving away their livelihood or something.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've thought a lot about it because there's so much potential in crowdsourcing, obviously. But yeah, for lawyers to do it, it's very, very hard. I think, there are a lot of incentives to keep knowledge private, and I think part of it's probably for fear that they're kind of giving their practice away. We actually ended up the best traction we got was from law schools, and so Gordon Smith, who's now the dean of BYU Law School, he was one of our first users of co-counsel. He used it in a class. We had law schools actually all over the world. We had like a law school in Reading, England, that mapped out European IP law. Professors in Santa Clara who were doing bankruptcy. Anyway, so we probably had 15 professors filling out things, and one professor, for example, made crowdsourcing an area of law an alternative to taking a test at the end of their class. Anyway, so that ultimately, it was a very interesting project. It didn't go anywhere kind of financially, but was very interesting, and then in an interesting way, kind of laid the foundation for what has happened, during the rest of my career. So yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think of how that evolved. I mean, you ended up coming back to Salt Lake City and practicing law. You had been practicing. You were in San Francisco, right? You were in San Francisco, and so you came back to Salt Lake City and joined. Is that when you joined Parsons Behle?
That's right. So then I came back. My wife and I had a child, and so both of our families are here. She works. She was a management consultant. So we both had kind of very demanding jobs. We needed a lot of kind of family support. So we moved back to where our families were. We're both from Salt Lake City originally. And so I joined a really great Salt Lake City firm called Parsons Behle Latimer. And then I just practiced there. I just thought I was just going to be a lawyer. But then what happened is at BYU, Gordon Smith, who had used that co-counsel software, became the dean of BYU Law School. And then he decided that he wanted to form a legal design lab because he had gone to, I think, like a conference at Stanford, and he had talked with Margaret Hagan, who's the head of the legal design lab there at Stanford, and became enamored with this idea of forming a legal design lab. And so I think he looked around, and I was the only person who had done anything kind of technology and legal related. And so then he asked me if I, would be interested in something like that. And I actually knew Margaret a little bit, and so I knew what Margaret was doing, and I was certainly interested in kind of legal technology, and so together Gordon and I then formed LawNext. But LawNext really had its roots in co-counsel because Gordon had used it before, which is kind of interesting. This I wouldn't call it a failure, but it certainly wasn't a big success of a project. Kind of led into this, but
that's interesting. So LawNext was in 2017. You kind of launched it. You were probably working on it for a while before that, but I know I had the great fortune to come out here during your inaugural semester and meet with, 9 people I think you had in that initial lab. And at that point you were kind of getting close to developing the concept that you had worked out through this whole process. But talk about what was the idea behind Law Lab? What were you trying to do with it?
Yeah, so so Gordon kind of mentioned
LawNext and not Law Lab.
Yeah, Gordon had mentioned, let's let's do this. So I looked around at the law school labs. I was actually very impressed. I thought, gosh, this is a very fun, vibrant space. I thought one area where kind of the space could be improved that I thought that I could bring, actually not that I could bring, that Lincoln could bring, because I knew Lincoln, was like some really palpable results through developing technology. Like I knew Lincoln could develop a product very quickly and do it very well. And so I thought, geez, I'm going to form this lab and we are going to make a product. We are going to make a product that we are going to release at the end of the term. And I knew Lincoln could do that. And so we got this class together. And so that was the idea. We're going to pick a problem. And we're not just going to talk about it.
Pick an A to J problem.
Exactly.
Pick something. I mean, the idea was that you're going to identify an access to justice issue in the state of Utah. Right. And like many of those issues, they often have applicability in other states as well, because these issues are not unique to any one state. But identify that issue, have the students go through the whole design thinking process to figure out how to tackle that issue.
Yeah, exactly. All the way from beginning thinking about the problem all the way to having a real product that people can use at the end. And so we kind of stumbled upon what I think and now am convinced of is kind of one of the juggernauts of access to justice issues, which is debt collection lawsuits. And so we looked at the stats of who was defaulting in cases. I think that's kind of where we started. We thought, like, okay, we want to lower the default rate because it seemed very high in Utah. And then we realized, like, oh my gosh, like 85% of these are all just in one area of law, which is debt collection. I mean, and actually, the more we looked at the numbers, the more we were just astounded by them. I mean, there are 70, some years there's over 70,000 debt collection lawsuits a year in Utah, which is like 2/3 of all filings.
That's amazing.
And 99% of those people do not hire attorneys, and about 80% of them default.
And you've probably got a big company in most cases on the other side. I mean, a credit card company or something like that.
Very sophisticated parties on one side, and very, very unsophisticated parties on the other. And so, we looked at that, and my background is as a litigator, and so I knew that answering a complaint, it's not the most complicated thing in the world. Now, just like my friend, with co-counsel, it is very complicated if you don't know what to do. But if you have any guidance at all, you can answer a lawsuit complaint. I mean, for every allegation, there's really only 3 ways that you can answer it. You can say, I agree, I disagree, or I don't know. Anyway, so we developed kind of this automated tool for it with Lincoln, and Lincoln did an incredible job of doing that, and a designer who was very, very talented. But yeah, we went through the whole design process and developed this automated tool. Solo Suit, which then we released, and it was a wild success. I mean, more people used that tool in the first month than we expected in the entire year.
Yeah, really.
And yeah, I mean, we were just astounded by it.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounded like it was an amazing process for the students to go through. I mean, again, I got to sit in on all of one class out of a whole semester's worth of work. But I mean, I remember, them talking at that point, kind of reporting on, the process they've gone through, going out and getting interviews with the sort of the stakeholders in the process, talking to actual debtors, talking to people at the courts, talking to lawyers, trying to figure out how this whole process works. What are the problems? What are the issues? It's a pretty amazing process.
Yeah. I actually, I became very close to those students. I mean, I'm actually going to try not to get emotional about it, but I really thought it was a very special experience for me. And
one of them was just a contender in our startup alley competition at ABA Tech Show. Which was pretty cool. I was glad to see that, because I remember George coming up to me one time when I was in Utah saying, I'm going to be in that Startup Alley competition next time you do it. And I kind of said, sure you are. And there he was.
Yeah,
he did it.
A lot of the students are kind of branching off into anyway. Yeah, I mean, I didn't kind of think that this would happen, but a lot of the students are branching off and doing things like that. Like one of our students interned for the summer at Fastcase.
Yeah. That's right too. Yeah.
With Ed Walters.
Yeah.
And anyway, like people have reached out to use the software. I've licensed it out to a couple students.
Yeah.
So that they can kind of use that automation software.
Good.
And anyway, it was really a really special experience with a really fun result at the end.
And are you still working with LawX? Are you still involved with it? Or
I am. Yeah. So we did LawX year 2.
Yeah. And you worked with University of Arizona this year, is that right?
With the University of Arizona. Yeah, we ended up having a little bit of a hiccup because I moved to Wilson Sonsini. We didn't have as kind of ready access to the software that we thought that we were going to use. We thought really we were just going to. In the end, we also decided to make another automated tool for people who had been sued for a debt. Uh-huh. But then, I ended up licensing that software to another firm for use there, and then moving to Wilson, we kind of had to like clean our hands of it. Yeah. And so, but anyway, that product is going to come out in the next month or two, we think, using our new software that we're building here at Wilson Sonsini.
This is Bob, and I'll get back to my interview with Kimball Parker in just a moment.
But first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, let's continue this week's interview.
So, not to jump around, but the kind of one of the next steps for you in your I guess your tech history as opposed to your lawyer history was back at your firm. You started a lab within your firm to develop. In particular, a GDPR compliance tool. I don't know if that was the initial goal when you started the lab, but that was kind of the first product you developed there. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so my firm had kind of seen the success of LawX, and they thought like, gosh, that is really interesting. Maybe you should try to build legal technology for us. And I was just telling you before, when Bob came to visit BYU and visited LawX, and that was kind of at a time where I was thinking, geez, well, am I going to keep practicing, or am I really going to like jump into this legal technology thing full time? And I was telling you, Bob, I don't know if you remember, like, gosh, should I do this? What help me think through this process? And you kind of said like, well, I kind of think you should go for it. And so
easy for me to say.
Yeah. And so we formed that, and really, from the leadership, they have a very innovative head of that law firm. His name is Hal Pose. He is the nicest person, but and really I think has a really interesting view of the future. But Hal's the one who approached me and said, "Hey, how about we form a lab here?" And so yeah. So then the first thing we did, a friend of mine at the firm was telling. Actually, my friend had the idea. Kind of came to me and said, hey, there's this crazy European privacy law, and nobody is prepared for it, and everybody is freaking out. When they learn about it, everybody's freaking out about it. And so we should see what we can automate for the GDPR. And so I licensed that solo suit software for no money over to the firm for that use. And so we automated the kind of documents you would need for the GDPR. And so that product was really hilariously successful. We built it again. Lincoln was our engineer, as always. We built it in about maybe a month and a half or 2 months. I didn't sleep for an extended period of time doing it. We got all the kind of document templates we needed. We created question flows for them. And we created this product called GDPR IQ, and it ended up being a pretty big success. It was profitable within kind of 4 to 6 weeks. It had paid back all the money that it took kind of in development and our time and everything. And then it drove tons of clients into the firm. It was one of the most successful client development efforts that the firm had ever had. And actually, we didn't even intend it for that. We just thought, let's try to make as much money as we can. Automating this
off the product
and
itself.
It did, and it made a good amount of money, and and brought clients into the firm, and the clients loved it. We got thank you notes. Because again, nobody really thought about the GDPR until like sometimes days before it went into effect.
Yeah.
And they could go onto our site and generate all the documents they needed in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And so, we had people, no exaggeration, calling us almost in tears. And then, we would help them through it. It was so rewarding. It was it was the most rewarding, one of the most rewarding things I've done professionally. Kind of helping people sort through that. And then, and so it really did well. And
so was that what got Wilson Sonsini to come knocking on your door, or
yeah, kind of. So then, I have a friend at Wilson who actually I went to church with when I used to live out in the Bay Area, and so he had kind of kept track of what we were doing, and so he reached out, and then Wilson kind of made me a great offer, and listen, I love Parsons Behle. I actually will always love that place, but working with Wilson Sonsini really is just like, I can't even believe I have this opportunity. Actually, I'm still in shock that they're letting me build things for them.
Yeah. So you started in January with them, and you're working for a subsidiary called SixFifty, and I guess we're sitting in the SixFifty's world headquarters right now, right?
Right.
I mean, you and Lincoln and a couple of other people here.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking how I don't know if it struck you at all as ironic that this Silicon Valley law firm would come to Salt Lake City, Utah, looking to start its tech subsidiary. I mean, I understand we're sitting in a big, this is almost like a Silicon Valley right here,
right.
This area that we're sitting in. I was just over at Net Documents this morning. I know Adobe's right around the corner. I mean, there's
right.
tech company after tech company here, but still, it seemed a little ironic that would happen. But,
I mean, I told friends about it. I mean, like, all of my brothers are lawyers. And I have a brother who's actually he's like the best lawyer I know, but he's a lawyer at Dorsey Whitney, and he was like, what? It was kind of like I've never heard of anybody, Wilson poaching anybody from Utah for anything. And so I think it was a surprise. Wilson has been so incredibly accommodating and generous because, I'm sure Wilson would love for this office to actually be in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
But again, because of my family circumstance and Lincoln's, and it's hard for us to move. My family's here. My wife works here. She has a great job now for a big hospital network here. Yeah. And so, but they were like, okay, sure, just stay down there. Do it down there. I mean, now you can do anything anywhere. But
right.
And so we established it here. We actually named it 650 because that's the firm's address, 650 Page Mill Road.
That was going to be my next question: is what the heck is 650?
Yeah, 650 Page Mill Road. And so we kind of thought, gosh, 650, that's kind of a cool name.
So what's the mission? What are you going to be doing here?
Oh, so I actually, again, I almost can't even believe that I have this opportunity, but it's just so fun.
You're having way too much fun.
Yeah, I am. It's just like I can't. It's just if I could pick one thing to do, I literally think this is what I would do. I think what's really exciting to me about it is Wilson Sonsini. There are some areas where they are the best law firm in the world.
Yeah.
They incorporated Google
right.
and Apple, and they brought Google public and Twitter and any company. Two companies went public this year in Utah, Pluralsight and Domo, or last year, I guess, and they represented both of them. I mean, they are the premier law firm in tech. And so, there are scores of businesses, probably hundreds of thousands of businesses that would love to use a firm like Wilson Sonsini, but they can't because Wilson Sonsini is a premier law firm and they have premier law firm prices. And so that, I think what really, really excites me about it really is kind of the same thing that excited me about automating debt collection lawsuits, is that you're making legal services more accessible. And here it's top quality legal services. And so, we're going to take areas where Wilson is the best, and we are going to automate it and make it accessible and put it at a price point that anybody can afford. A company in South Carolina can afford this, and they can use Wilson Sonsini services. I mean, I shouldn't say that they can use Wilson Sonsini services. They can receive Wilson Sonsini quality things.
They're getting the benefit of the knowledge that Wilson Sonsini puts into creating the documents that you then adapt for these platforms.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, only a small segment of the market can afford them. And now we're going to try to make it so that whole other segment, which is probably 90% of the market who couldn't afford Wilson, can now afford it. And they can have the peace of mind of it, and they can feel good about it. And that does not just apply to business issues. For example, Wilson does a huge amount of asylum law. And so, we are going to automate tons of pro bono things as well. So we're building, right now we're building kind of a general thing and a specific thing. So we're building a platform and an automation platform that we think is going to be excellent. It's actually the third time now that we've built it. We built it, Lincoln and I built it with SoloSuit. We learned a lot about it. We built it for GDPR IQ. And then when we moved to Wilson, we kind of thought, you know what? We're just going to do this from scratch. We're going to take all the things we learned from kind of those experiences, and we're going to start now. We're starting fresh. And so we're building this platform that I think eventually we're going to be able to kind of distribute to anybody who wants to use it. But we're going to be able to automate incredible things that are going to help businesses and individuals who can't afford attorneys.
Yeah. You intrigued me with what you just said. I mean, what were some of the mistakes you made with the platform before that you didn't do this time? And what did you learn about how to build a platform going through those prior experiences?
Yeah, I think really it was now with SoloSuit and with GDPR IQ, hundreds of people, thousands of people have gone through those systems now.
Yeah.
And so we were able to see okay, they're getting caught up here, or people came to us and said, actually this is hard to use because of XYZ. So one adjustment we made, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but actually I think is going to open it up and make it so much easier to use for businesses, which it was a feature that I showed you, is that before, our software was kind of like TurboTax. It just had, a question and some supportive text and some fields. And so, you'd read the question and the supportive text if you wanted, and then fill in information in the fields. But that's the only thing we showed, and we showed a progress bar up top. And so a lot of businesses, when it came to a very complicated GDPR document, for example, would say I don't know what the next question is, and actually I may want to know what the 100th question is. Because maybe I know that information, but I don't know this one. And so, it's you had to answer it in the sequence that we wanted.
Right.
And which wasn't always the sequence that a client wanted to answer it. So we again, that was one thing that we thought of from scratch. We thought okay, we're going to do this all new. How do we solve that problem? And so now we kind of have a scrolling email type thing on the side where you can scroll through and see every question. You could go down to the 100th question and answer that. You don't have to answer them in any order, but you'll be able to easily see which ones are done and which ones are missing, and you can sort them. And so that's a pretty easy example of kind of something we learned from people using it and trying to get better and making it a good platform.
Yeah, and I remember when you first told me about this. I guess it was formally announced in February. I think I said January before, but it was formally announced in February. I'm sure you were working on it for a while before that. But I remember when we first talked, you said that among the future plans are to work on more access to justice related issues. You just mentioned immigration. I mean, what else? Once you get this done, do you already have a roadmap of other kinds of things you're going to be working on, or thoughts about what other kinds of things you're going to be working on?
Yeah. It's a very good question. So we are starting with we're going to automate the kind of major obligations under the new California privacy law. So that law goes into effect on January 1st. It's going to be just like the GDPR, I think, which is that people aren't going to pay attention to it, and then they're actually going to look at it and they're going to realize this is actually a very overwhelming, business-changing law. And so, I mean, actually, I'm so excited for this because it's going to be very rewarding to help these businesses who I think, again, are going to be panicked, and they're going to think it's going to cost them $100,000 to do, and we're going to be able to offer it for a price that even a small business could afford. We actually think that we're going to be cheaper than any firm, even a very, very small firm, can do it for. And actually, we're going to match if anybody can find our equivalent services for less, then we'll just match it. And so we're going to make it very easy to kind of comply with that, or get pretty far down the road in compliance with that law. So that's what we're doing first. That'll be released sometime kind of in the late spring. Then I think I told you we're collaborating with LawNext and University of Arizona to release an automated tool for landlord-tenant that I've been working on with Stacy Butler, fantastic professor down in Arizona. Other law schools have reached out about collaborating, and so I think I'll tell you what's on our radar: debt collection in other states. We would love to automate debt collection in other states. That's an issue that I care about a lot. Yeah. Asylum. That's also an issue that I care about a lot. It's interesting. My family kind of has this, history with immigration. My gosh, now I'm going to try to not get emotional again, but like my great grandparents, actually, gosh, might even be more than great, immigrated from India into Utah of all places, because they became Mormon, and so they came here. And so my dad actually formed this organization called the Refugee Justice League that kind of represents immigrant rights here in Utah. And so I care a lot about immigrant rights, and my family cares a lot about immigrant rights. And this firm happens to care a lot about immigrant rights. And so that's something we are for sure going to do. Yeah. We're going to look at asylum and other immigrant issues, and we're going to try to make it as easy as possible for people to manage that system. And let me tell you, we are in the best possible state for that. There are more foreign language speakers in Utah, per capita than anywhere else in the nation. And so, because people go off on Mormon missions, I have friends that speak 12 different languages. And so it's a perfect place to build something, translate it, make it as accessible as possible. And so, but yeah, we're looking at issues kind of like that. Those are the ones that we kind of are really on our radar now, that we care about deeply.
What is Wilson Sonsini's interest in this? I mean, why do they want to create a subsidiary like this? What is it? What benefit do they get out of it, or did they see that they might get out of it?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to kind of what we were talking about before. Wilson right now, because they're such a premier law firm, services such a small amount of the market. And there's this whole other part that would love to use Wilson. But it's just hard. Like the how the resources are set up in a big law firm like that, they just can't expand in that way. And so, or it's very, very difficult, and maybe impossible with the model that's kind of currently there. And so I think, software is a force multiplier, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's a way that you can help thousands of other companies and kind of spread your influence and your knowledge base in a way that is easier to scale. I won't say easy, it's very, very difficult, but much easier to scale, much easier to disperse, and so I think there's that big pot of money, of all this other money that's kind of going to mid-sized firm and small-sized firms for this, that I think Wilson is looking at and thinking, I think we can do a better job than them. Yeah. We're a bigger firm. We have more expertise. We have the best experts in the world, and we want to find a way to try to capture that. Yeah. And so I think there's that for sure. I think they see a big financial opportunity, which I completely agree with.
Yeah.
And I think they think it's cool. I mean, I think they think it's interesting. It's like a novel, very very exciting thing. And actually, I'll say I've been traveling around to all the Wilson offices, and I guess I've been a little skeptical about kind of what type of reception this is gonna, we're gonna have from the attorneys, because I've worked at big law firms.
Yeah.
And I've tried to sell technology and tried to get big law firms to adopt technology, and it's impossible.
Yeah.
And so, but like this firm is so excited about this. I mean, I was just telling this team, I've never seen anything like it, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say I don't think it's ever happened. Not at a place like Wilson Sonsini. Like I traveled up to the Seattle office. Everybody's curious about it. They're happy about it. They want to help. They're saying, "Gosh, can my clients use your California tool?" And it's like, "Oh my gosh, what has happened here?"
Yeah.
And so Wilson, I think it's interesting. This has all the ingredients to be a big success. Whether we can pull it off is kind of another question, but there is a lot of will and a lot of excitement in the firm to make it happen, with management and with individual lawyers.
That's great.
Which I think is unique. Again, talking with lawyers before about technology, they just seemed like apathetic.
Yeah.
Or openly hostile. And so that I literally now have talked to over 20 lawyers in the firm, partners, big important partners in the firm, and not one has been apathetic, not a hint of hostility. And so I don't know. Yeah, the firm is kind of, I think actually because of some internal efforts that had happened before. There's a person named David Wang, who did a lot of work for years, kind of pushing technology in the firm. That it's a fertile ground to work there.
Yeah, well, I'm sure if you even go to a firm like Wilson Sonsini in the first place, you're sensitive to the importance of technology and understand the importance of technology. But I wonder about some of the stuff. I mean, like you deal with the California privacy law, that's something that directly relates back to the work of the firm. When you start talking about doing work around immigration or debt collection cases, I mean, that's never going to go back to them in terms of potential clients or business or something like that. I mean, do they support that kind of work as well?
Yeah, so the firm does a lot of pro bono.
Yeah,
I think it's not wrong to say that they're they certainly consider themselves one of the leaders in kind of big law pro bono. And so I think, there are a lot of people who care a lot about pro bono projects there.
Yeah.
And those people, have actually kind of, now we've talked with a lot of them, have thought like, this has got to be done better. I mean, I've actually had this thought with pro bono. I mean, I've been at law firms and people, for example, let's say debt collection. At my prior firm, and kind of Quinn Emanuel before, it's like people would just literally run through the exact same case time after time after time and do it from scratch. And anyway, I've kind of always had this thought like, you know what? Stop doing that. Like, in fact, instead of doing a case and helping an individual person, let's just like pool our resources and let's automate something. So that instead of helping one person, we can help 1,000 people, right? And so, like, I think that's kind of one of the big inefficiencies with law firm pro bono.
Yeah,
is that it is so one-off.
Yeah,
every single thing is one-off, and it has to stop being like that.
Right.
For it to make any difference, the gap between those who need legal services and the legal services that lawyers can provide to pro bono is grossly outweighed. The need grossly outweighs the supply. And so this one-off system, it just is not, it's not making a big enough dent.
Right.
And so those things need to be automated.
Yeah.
They just have to be automated. And so I think Wilson catches that vision, and it's something that people there have also thought about. And so, us coming in and saying, listen, instead of helping 100 asylum people a year. Let's automate it, and let's help 10,000 asylum people a year. That is exciting for them. Let's create a tool so that nonprofits can help asylum people 20 times more efficiently.
Yeah.
And so I think they're kind of excited about it. I think the other thing about this platform is once the platform is built, it's not going to take a lot of engineering to pump out new products.
Right.
So it'll take Lincoln. I was just talking to Lincoln about it. It'll take probably 6-7 days to do the engineering work for a whole new product. And we're going to try to cut that down so that it takes like a couple hours to do the engineering work.
Are you going to give Lincoln weekends off or not?
Yeah, no. Lincoln's he's got to be on the clock right now. but we're hoping to make it easy, kind of a plug and play tool.
Yeah.
That then we'll be able to pump things out fast, and that won't really require us, right? That will hopefully will make it easy enough that we can have kind of less oversight over it, but that things can be kind of produced in mass.
Yeah. Well, that's all I had. Anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap up here?
No. I'm just so thrilled that you decided to come out, and it's fun because I can't even believe this kind of personal journey that's taken me here, and it's fun because you've played a role in it. So.
Well, it's been the last couple of years in particular. I've been able to kind of see some of it firsthand. So it's been interesting for me.
Well, thank you,
I don't know if we ever mentioned, but SixFifty is of course at SixFifty.com, and you can there's information up now there about the privacy application that you're building, the California privacy application that you're building.
Yeah, that's right. So companies actually can go on now and they can test whether it's likely that the law applies to them. They can also download a timeline material which was prepared by the privacy group. Again, every kind of California privacy thing that we produce is heavily vetted and kind of approved by our privacy department, which again I think is the best in the world. And so anyway, so there's some kind of free downloads, free tools that people can use on there now, and then we'll have our kind of more robust paid packages, which will be affordable starting kind of late spring.
Great. Well, Kimball Parker, president of SixFifty, newly minted president of SixFifty. Thanks so much for being with me on LawNext. Good to talk to you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks to Kimball Parker for hosting us today in his offices in Lehi, Utah. And thanks to the sponsors who keep this show running. Thanks also to Bob Ambrogi for producing and editing the show. That's it for this week. This is Bob Ambrogi.